do it to yourself, you do. That's why it hurts. You do it to yourself, just you.
Brún, 21 years old and SU President.
What do you feel are your biggest accomplishments during this year?
My biggest accomplishments, I'd say it's a very general point, but I think reform, I would have to say, as a general point, is my biggest accomplishment. It was a very broad agenda to start out with, and part of it was planned, part of it was circumstantial, but either way, to get to the point where I was satisfied, it took a massive amount of work, and that included introducing the new Students' Union Constitution, which I'm delighted about, which obviously for the first time ever we're going to have a full-time postgraduate officer. We've increased representation at class rep level hugely. We've brought in very tight financial controls, a finance committee. It means the accounts are going to have to be published every year, and it just introduces better transparency throughout the entire union. I'm also very proud of the fact that we've finally got to a point whereby officers will be more accountable, with their reports going to be either accepted or rejected by council, and knock on discipline measures if they are not accepted. I think as part of that reform agenda as well, you know, obviously the formation of union companies, which is just about to be finalised, which links in with the financial controls, is very important. I suppose I would consider it an achievement as well, the fact that we've had exceptionally difficult circumstances to deal with this year financially, and even just resource-wise from a staffing point of view. We haven't had the general manager or financial administrator role there for most of the year, and I've had to really fill both roles. And you know, that's been a blessing and a curse, because I've enjoyed being able to bring through all these reforms, because I've been working really in both those positions, and that's allowed me to do it. But at the same time, I suppose it has been a huge amount of work, and it means that it took up a lot of my time. But it did facilitate me making the changes that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to make.
What do you feel are your biggest failings during the year?
I suppose I would say, I think a failing potentially is that I didn't have the time I would have liked to devote to ensuring all officers are completing their briefs fully, and encouraging them enough maybe. But you know, I was a victim of circumstances to a certain extent with that, and I wish I could have devoted more time to it. But I feel with a couple of areas where I felt that I could have done better this year, I think I've addressed them in the Constitution. I have felt somewhat hampered, and the accountability measures in the Constitution hopefully now are going to solve that in the future.
So you actually feel that the average student had any meaningful input into the new Constitution? Were the emails really considered that thoroughly?
Yeah, absolutely. Every single bit of input we got was considered very thoroughly, and there are a lot of examples of that at play. Some people said they don't think officers should be able to profit from office. That went into the Constitution. Some societies felt, and sports clubs particularly, felt that they didn't get enough support in terms of protection of facilities, etc. So we created the new position of sports coordinator, societies coordinator, and they're just a couple of examples. But yeah, they were certainly acted upon.
And what about the 10% pay cut that you promised for all sabbatical officers? Did that come into play?
Technically it didn't. Operationally it kind of did, because obviously under the new financial controls that I introduced, I imposed taxes on officers, so the actual take-home pay of officers now is a good bit less, a good bit more than 10% less than what it was last year.
Yeah, but you can't equate paying tax with
of course not. Absolutely not. I wanted to introduce the pay cut on top of that, but unfortunately the IAB rejected it. Now, I don't think it's appropriate for me to go into too much about the IAB, but I'll just say this, that I have been frustrated on more than one occasion by their decisions this year.
And what about the student hardship fund that you then plan to set up with that money? Has there been anything?
Yeah, that's where the initial contact with Kylemore came from. We knew that with the financial situation, obviously, you know, this manifesto was written in April. No one really knew how much we were in trouble then. But I still think, considering that I have achieved the vast majority of the things on it. In terms of the hardship fund, we knew we couldn't just pluck €10,000 out of our budget because our budget was almost non-existent. So we had to get it from somewhere else, and that's where I approached Kylemore from, and we talked about them having a Kylemore welfare fund. Now that is translated into the form of food vouchers for students in need with quite a significant value. So while it's not exactly as it was on paper, I think considering the financial constraints, I think it's quite an achievement.
You further outlined in your manifesto an expansion to the now defunct loyalty card system to include free meals and drinks in the student bar. Are you disappointed with the failure of this card, and what about your plans to introduce a beer garden and a permanent wide range of €3 drinks?
Okay, well, I'll go through them one by one. First of all, the loyalty card. The loyalty card I did have high hopes for when I was elected, and I did think it had a lot of potential. But I suppose two things came to light. First of all, the Campus U card was rolled out, which came after the loyalty card, and it really did undermine the entire loyalty card program, because it was you could use it in all outlets across the campus and in areas like residences and when you're doing laundry, etc. So this became really the one for all card, and it did undermine our card. Secondly, obviously the financial situation was dire, and just looking at anywhere we could make savings, I did have to make savings, and the cost of the loyalty card were quite large, circa 20,000 a year for upkeep, and it was just something that we couldn't justify in light of the rollout of the U card.
How much did that cost the SU in the end?
The entire loyalty card project, I don't have the figure off the top of my head. I would say in the region of 30 to 40,000.
So again, we're talking about the financial crisis. That's been a running theme throughout the year. We featured it in the paper a number of times, and you've outlined several times your plan to rectify and fully account for the debt. So what steps have you taken to hold the people responsible for the debt to account?
Well, as I've said throughout the year, this is a long process. Frustratingly long, but necessary and certainly worthwhile. We don't have everything yet, so it would be premature to go and start pointing fingers. Once the final set of accounts are with us in roughly less than 2 weeks' time,
April 12th.
there will be an accountant's report with that, outlining why this happened, why they believe this happened, and where the fault lies. And at that point we can look at apportioning blame. But I have never made this process about pointing fingers. This has been about looking forward. Because at the end of the day, we can point fingers all we want, but what will it really achieve? Will it improve things for our students? Will it improve things for the union? Probably not. But if we look forward, if we devote our energy to actual reform and change and improving things, I think that's a better use of our time, to be
It
honest.
still doesn't excuse what has happened. So what steps will be taken?
It absolutely doesn't excuse what happened, and believe me, no one is angrier about it than me. It doesn't affect anyone more than it's affected me this year, and certainly I don't want to see this going unnoticed. I don't want to see this pass by without proper accountability, but I'm not in a position right now to say exactly what's going to happen, but certainly I do feel that proper accountability will need to come into play there.
A criticism directed at your presidency is that the sabbatical team that you manage have not performed to a high standard, on occasion missed a great deal of work, and even caused the occasional PR issue. You're not their babysitter, they're grown adults, but do you feel like you could have managed them better?
I believe that if it had been a normal year, I think I could have given more time to it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it would have achieved a better result. It has frustrated me at times, I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, it's the presidency, and this is something I've actually heard a couple of my earlier predecessors saying at the end of the year, that it is an endless frustration about, while you're expected to lead a team and manage, you don't really have the power to do anything if people don't perform, and that is endlessly frustrating. My only power of discipline is to refer a matter to the IAB, so anyone has that power, any member of the union. I don't have any particular power, and it is very frustrating when things can't be enforced. But you know, it's similar to the finances. The only way I've been able to tackle that is to look forward, is to look at the new constitution and to bring in more accountability measures. And that's what I feel has been achieved there. So I'm hoping that for Rachel and her presidency and presidencies in future, that they will have that additional safeguard of proper accountability.
And how do you feel the team performed overall?
I'm very happy with most respects. It's been an exceptionally difficult year. It's morale has been affected by all of this. There's no doubt about it. We've had the difficulty about the protests, for example. That it's not easy for an elected officer to deal with that, and I will always be eternally grateful for all 4 vice presidents supporting me on a personal level during some very difficult times, and banding together and being a team when it counted. That's not to say I think everyone has been perfect this year, and yes, I have been frustrated at times with at certain points a lack of work ethic once or twice, but at the same time, you do the best with what you have.
You said that there were some points that you weren't happy with at stages throughout the year. Could you elaborate on that?
Personally, I feel that no matter what your job is, if you're being paid, you come in on time, and there's no excuse. And that if there have been points where that hasn't always been the case for every officer. Now, I'm not going to pinpoint people here because I don't think that's fair. I want the students who voted them in to be the judge, just like they're going to be the judge of me. But that's all really I have to say. Yes, I have been frustrated at times, but I'm still grateful to everyone.
If you had to give yourself a rating out of 10, how well do you feel you've done this year?
Oh God, that's a hard question. If I'm to answer it genuinely, to be honest, I'm exceptionally proud of my year. I think I have performed very well. I think I could have hidden behind these problems and not tackled them, but I feel that I chose not to, and I think I brought people with me on it. Some of the decisions that were taken, I think, under other circumstances, if they weren't translated well to the student body, may have led to complete disaster. But I think it hasn't been easy to steady the ship throughout this year, and I think I have performed well in that regard. And it's not just about specific achievements, to be honest. What I'm probably most proud of is a cultural shift. My experience of the union before being president really has been criticism of the union and its officers have been about really mainly kind of laziness, work ethic, political opportunism. Whereas this year I feel most of the criticisms, all the criticisms directed at me have been about policy decisions and the direction of the union. And that's something I'm very proud of, because that means that we are putting in the work. That means that we have brought the union back to where it should be. And that means that there's proper opposition to policies, and that it's not about the boys' club anymore. And I do feel that has been achieved. I think a couple of years ago, council was essentially at the beck and call and the will of the sabbatical officers. That's been a kind of cultural change that I've wanted to introduce, and I do think that's been achieved. I think that's crucially important. I think the boys' club image has gone away, and that's very important as well. I think we're a more professional outfit, and I think we're a hell of a lot better off now than we were when I took over in July. I don't think, I've tried to keep my head down on a personal level as well. I work hard, and I don't look for plaudits, but if I had to say, I would give myself quite a high rating, but I don't really want to
If you
say.
had to give your other officers individually a rating out of 10, how well do you feel they've done this year?
Again,
Honestly.
I think students should be the judge of that. I have my opinions. Obviously, I've worked very closely with all of them throughout the year, but I don't think it's fair to single people out. They've had a full year in the public eye, and people have had plenty of opportunity to make their minds up. And I'll leave that with students.
You do it to yourself.